welcome everybody to Sonic Talk episode 468. This is the podcast that talks about music technology, software, quite a lot of software this week actually, synthesizers, drum machines, electronics, electronic engineering, electronic music, electronic production, live production, all of those things. So if that's the sort of stuff you're interested in, hang about and I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun. Also want to say thank you to our sponsors for this week, iZotope, who will be giving away yet another copy of Vocal Synth, their multi-format vocal processor, harmonies, vocoding, all kinds of stuff. You can find out about that roughly halfway through the show, so do stay tuned for that. Also want to say hello to the fulsome chat room, which there do seem to be a lot of people in there this week, which is awesome. Let me see how many we've got. Oh, over 100. Excellent. And we've also got our guys and gals on YouTube, because we stream this via YouTube Live, which is embedded on our page. So we've got our own IRC server. This will also, is in fact also now going live to Facebook Live. This is a new thing for us. Sorry for your belated start for Facebook Live, people. I've just sent it live. I might just pause and preamble a bit there. So, hello and welcome everybody on Facebook too. This is Sonic Talk 468. So, thank you very much for joining us. You might have just missed the intro, but hey, what the hell? I'll just have to. You'll just have to stick with me. So, anyway. Where was I? I was getting lost there. Sorry, I was a bit flummoxed. That's the thing, because now we've introduced all these additional streams, it tends to kind of mount up. The amount of things that you've got to do and deal with tends to get a little bit over the top. Anyway, so let's say hello to our guest this week. We've on his lonesome, Mr. Rich Hilton from sunny Connecticut, where he's Nile Rodgers studio guy and also tours the world as a member of the disco band Chic. How are you, Rich? Are you well?
Yes, I am well, thank you. I
am very glad to hear that, and I'm glad that you managed to join us this week. Hiltonius.com, check out, well, it's not entirely up to date, but, you know, you can get a sense of what Rich is up to. Check discographies, that's probably your best bet.
No, well, Hiltonius.com still does the trick, sort of.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to hear that. So this week, we've got quite a lot of stuff coming on. Now, let's start with this, because this is a really interesting bit of software that I'm surprised no one's done before. It's from Dialog Audio.
And it starts out very quietly.
It certainly does. This is a guy, here we go.
Hi, and welcome to this introduction to the Dialog Audio Modulation Processor.
This is the same guy who does the voiceover work for
a powerful modulator plugin, which
UVI.
helps to integrate your hardware synths into a modern DAW environment, with all the convenience of tempo and host synchronization that we've come to expect from plugins. Synths with MIDI inputs can be modulated via MIDI continuous controllers or system-exclusive messages. Or you can patch spare outputs from your audio interface to your analog synth's control voltage inputs and generate high-resolution audio rate CV modulation. And of course, you can use it to modulate other plugins as well as hardware.
I'll stop it there. But the key thing is not really the fact that it's got the CV output. The fact that it's got, what's it got? It's got I think it's 3 LFOs. Let me see. Yeah, 3 LFOs, 2 slope generators, 4 envelope generators, and 4 VCA outputs. And that basically, you can route that obviously out to CV out, which is not something new, something that expert sleepers have been doing for a long time. But you can modulate MIDI values such as CCs and system exclusive strings, which means that you can send this out into hardware world and have everything sort of clocking from the same kind of book. And that is something that I think is really interesting. I don't know if it seems like such a simple idea, Rich. And every time I say this to people, they say, it's really difficult interpolation. But these guys seem to have done it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I've been waiting for one of these since the Dr. Click in the early 80s, which had 2 control voltage generators of variable wave shape and variable time subdivision to the FSK that it was reading, and enabled you to actually do clocked control voltages, 2 of them at the same time. That was really cool. And I sort of wondered when somebody else would get this idea. And this is cool. This is just unbelievably cool, the way you can use it across the platforms and stuff, and the way it's dedicated pretty much to control information. I love that.
I mean, because the thing is also you can bus things internally via MIDI and modulate other parameters that aren't modulatable. And I remember, because every time I review a MIDI controller now, I think, why don't they just put like MIDI LFOs in there so you can sync those to external tempo and then map them to a specific control value with maximum min. I mean, it just seems like a real no-brainer to me. But, you know, obviously it's been difficult. I mean, the thing about this is $50, which is astonishingly good value considering, you know, what it can do, at least on paper. Obviously, we haven't seen it. It's available for Mac OS X 10.7 Plus, Windows 7, 8, 10, and this is what it looks like. So you can send CC, and you might not be able to see there, but there are a couple of screenshots here. If I bring it, you can see down the bottom here, there's sysx strings, and I'm guessing one of those values would be, you know, you assign it to whatever the modulator is. And you also do CV gear, obviously, if you've got a DC coupled thing, and also in host. I just think it's one of those things that I'd like to try out, and I wonder how fast you can get, because obviously when you're moving slowly controller values that maybe only have 128, maybe this does NRPNs as well, then, you know, you're going to get stepping and stuff. But, you know, how fast were you getting on with Dr. Click? You know, when you were sending out, could you actually get quite smooth movements, or was it a bit...
Yeah, I loved it. I used to love it, and even talked to Dan Garfield, the inventor of the thing, about it. Really loved using clocked control voltages. At the time, all I was doing with it is some control of delays. I remember one situation where I wanted a flanger to occur in a particular place in the rhythm all the time, and you know, in a sort of descending flange. And it was easy to do that. And I used to use it to change the pitch of drum machine toms and such. Certain things that were controllable by CV I was playing around with at the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, used it, loved it. Have experiment results I did back, 25, 30 years ago.
I'm wondering what else these guys do. I'm just looking at what it is that they also do. Dialog Audio is not necessarily a kind of a name you'd think would be to do with MIDI and control voltage. It looks like that's it. More things to come. So we're just going to have to stay tuned for their for more of their additional stuff. But anyway, it avoids the whole conversation of how does it sound. Yeah, that's true. We could just talk about the concept of it, and the concept of it is flipping great. And I wonder how possible it would be to put in MIDI controllers. I mean, it just seems like, you know, like a lot of the M Audio stuff, I was thinking it would be so good to just be able to map, particularly when you've got things that aren't modulatable. I mean, it means that you can bust things as you wish. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, if you're not getting it, perhaps why you would need this. The idea is you could modulate parameters over MIDI and CC in synthesizers that those parameters are not modulatable. And I suppose the only downside might be if they are a bit zippery or they're not designed to be moved, then you might get hardware issues because of that. But generally speaking, I mean, that's something that is a pretty much a first.
Yeah, so, what's the sysx stream get like when you start doing a bunch of that? Is the other question.
Yeah, well, because the priorities for sysx is different, isn't it, to real-time CC control. I don't know how it prioritizes. I guess if you had your own MIDI port for it, you've got a multi-IO interface, it shouldn't be an issue, right?
I'm only guessing.
I wouldn't have thought so, because obviously, you know, inside the computer could handle manipulations of strings like that all day, I'd imagine. I can't think that it would clog up at that end. But sometimes certain MIDI ports and MIDI interfaces do get a bit upset by having large amounts of continually variable sysx. I mean, it does tend to sometimes, on some older synths anyway, not work in quite the way you'd like, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Somebody will find out.
But there are some really good examples on here, some audio examples of stuff, which, let me see if I can scroll down in here. There's a really nice Deep Juno 6 bass, I think this is. And that bass sound, that's the wrong button. So this is modulating the filter. So, you know, it's capable of doing, and this is JHP, this is sysx. And I'm guessing it's modulating that, but that sounds pretty good. So I'm guessing maybe this software has some kind of interpolation built in, so it's helping smooth those parameters anyway. So anyway, do check it out. Dialogaudio.com, $50. it's pretty. I mean, I think I might get hold of that because I think it's the sort of thing that would be very useful all over the place. Right, let's try another topic. This is Modobass, which is the new physically modelling bass plugin from RK Multimedia, who are formerly really known for amp modelling and sample sets. So this is kind of a new. This has apparently been 8 years in the making. I think it's got 16 basses, which you could sort. I mean, under this mix, it sounds very authentic. Whoa! Actually, I could do without that in my ears. I don't want to hear lots of distorted guitars. But the first, they call it the first physically modelled electric bass. I don't know if that's true. I guess it must be. And it's been, they say they've been working on it with, no, I did get an email just before the show started from my contact at IK. Said it's 8 years in development, one of the oldest universities in Europe, but no one anywhere seemed to have a list of it. But it is the University of Padua, which is established in 1222. So I'm guessing if they started thinking about modelling electric basses back then, they probably are pretty good at it by now. So I don't think that's the case though. But this is, I mean, there are quite a lot of examples here. I mean, I think there's a whole bunch of, that initial thing was not absolutely great, but there's a load of SoundCloud stuff here, which is a bit more, which is a lot more impressive. I don't know how much better that is than a good sample library, but I think there's more expression in there. And there's a bit of Jacko. Although it's not a fretless bass, obviously, this one. Let's chill out, Rich. It's much nicer than all that kind of thrashy electric guitars and stuff. So this is an interesting idea.
It is. And sounds great in their demo. And as you point out, is new ground for IK in terms of software presentations. I don't recall them doing any other modeling instruments before.
No, definitely.
It sounded great in the demos, and they've got parameters for everything, and then some. So you can tweak to your heart's content. I would assume that they provide a host of good starting points, but there's an insane level of modeled tweakability in this thing, including replacing and moving pickups and determining hand positions. And
I've got a little shot of the interface here, which is determining hand position. So you can control the position of where you're effectively playing the bass.
Where the hand is.
Where the hand is, yeah.
The hand that's striking the strings.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am a bit of a sucker for good sounding electric basses. I really like the sound of a plectrum Rickenbacker through an Ampeg, kind of just giving it some, it really does something to me. I mean, I guess it's my, being around in the early days of punk and hearing all that kind of thrashy sound in the jam and those things. And I've tried to recreate those sounds with real bassists, but I mean, it's really hard actually, because you have to have the right kind of amp rig, which is not a common thing. A big kind of like PV 8x10 or whatever is just not the sort of thing you see people with today. But presumably with this, you could kind of build that stuff in.
They suggest that you should be able to do that. And there are existing softwares I think you could use. Scarby's Rickenbacker for Native Instruments is
I did use that last time actually, and I loved it.
Yeah, it's great. Actually, his would be, in my view, the bar that's been set. If you want to really go after who's done bass guitars, in my view, better than anybody, you got to start from Thomas Scarby, and you can move on to Eric Persing and the nice people at Spectrasonics, because Trillion is absolutely no slouch ever. But Scarby's basses are uniformly incredibly well done, and might get you closest to that sort of pick on a Rickenbacker. Although this thing, I would like to hear it, and it's got a couple of amp models. I'm a little surprised, given all of the stuff they've got that there are literally 2 amp models at the end of that whole thing that you can go through.
Right, I think I've got a shot. What's that? That looks like
there's a solid state and there's a tube, and the tube is supposed to look like some sort of big old Ampeg.
Yeah, that looks like the Ampeg flip top, but with not in the flip top.
Right.
Yeah, that looks
and
like
a little bit bigger speaker.
And that one looks like I don't know what that looks like. Is that like a Ampeg as well?
Maybe a more recently GK style or whatever, Eden, or maybe it's I'm speculating here, but the point is there's only 2 of them, and neither of them is that 8x10 configuration that you were just talking about that Ampeg SVT sort of popularized. And it's just surprising to me that there are so few amp models compared to the enormous wealth of other tweakable parameters there are on the bass end of things.
I like the idea.
That said, it looks like a great product. And I'm sorry. That said, it looks like a great product, and in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big a deal to me, but it was just notable to me that there's only 2 amp models at the end of all of that.
Yeah. Gosh, it's amazing, isn't it? I can manage to interrupt my only guest.
No. I paused.
I thought I was in there.
I saw the hole that
I went for it. And the thing for me about model stuff is it's quite exciting. I mean, this is what I like about I liked about the sculpture in Logic was the fact that you could morph. You didn't have to go for the standard stuff. You could go, well, actually, I want my bass to be 300 feet long with a body the size of the QE2 and strings as thick as. Do you know what I mean? That's the sort of thing that interests me, where you can make these kind of like superhero basses, and it doesn't look like you could do that. I mean, I'm guessing you can kind of do things like get right up to the bridge.
I don't think anybody's trying to do that with this, although you can, add strings and drop pitches, and you can do drop D tuning. You can do all that kind of stuff with this thing, and it's really clever in the way. I have to say, I'm blown away. I don't know who they hired, who they found over there at IK to write this thing, but it's really pretty amazing at the base end of how many adjustable parameters that they're displaying, and watching them operate it leads me to believe that they all do some cool stuff.
I suppose the thing is with this, it's almost like to get the most out of it, you sort of need to play it with a MIDI bass. Do you know what I mean?
Well, there's that. There's the painstaking operation of having to actually program into MIDI the kinds of behaviors that get you the sounds you want from this sort of thing. And how far do you have to go into that? Like, how close is it to you put up a patch and you just start playing and it sounds like bass playing, which is what it needs to do. And I bet you, it does.
Well, I think there's some key switching type of technology involved, which you would understand because people who are used to the contact kind of paradigm would kind of get that. Key switching. So by switching keys at the bottom, you get different articulations, which is what you do with the Scarby stuff as well, don't you? You kind of like.
Well, yeah, but when you say key switching, it almost implies that a velocity level is triggering a different kind of sample, and I don't think that by the nature of modeling that's. Yes, you're modulating various things very deeply according to various things like velocity and aftertouch, but
well, no, I mean
there's nothing being switched.
No, well, there is. There are articulations and plays, because if you've got slides and you've got more fret noise or that kind of thing, where you can switch that kind of element of the sound. That's what I mean, using keys to switch sets.
Right, understood. Yeah. And there can be different things apparent in different proportions at different velocity levels, for example, and that's easier to do in some ways in modeling, I would think, than it is to do in sampling. But proof's in the pudding. I bet you it sounds great. I'm really impressed with it as a product, and I'm not haven't been an IK kind of guy that much. So maybe this is me giving up I'm not so much of an IK guy.
Yeah.
Because it's a cool product. I was really impressed.
I'll give them a tagline for free. IK, okay. Anyway, there we go. That'll do. There are quite a lot of basses here. They've even got the little Hofner, the old Firebird Who bass, the various different P basses and G basses and what have you. So plenty of stuff there. Anyway, it's on sale now. You can pre-order it. I'm not entirely sure where it's coming out. €179 is what it'll cost you now, reduced from $359, which I think is a hefty chunk. Really, I'm pretty sure they won't necessarily be going to that full list price anytime soon, but that's just me speculating. But good luck to them, because, I mean, I suppose the thing about modelled instruments, it'd be great, maybe this is the beginning, because as we've seen before with the synthesizer modeling, you get these kind of increments and steps where suddenly all this is possible, and you get a whole bunch of additional kind of instruments to take advantage of this. And I wonder if this is going to sort of open the floodgates, and maybe this is a whole new area for IK, or indeed other DSP coders who just know how to get the most from this sort of technology. Right? We'll see. Okay, right.
Yep.
Now let's do we'll go to the ad now, because the next topic was actually an iZotope topic as well, because they've brought out Neutron, which looks also very interesting. But before we do that, let's just say hello and welcome to iZotope, our sponsors. They're telling you about Vocal Synth, which is a 4-element vocal processing plugin. Vocal Synth, got Polyvox, which does harmonies, unison, and octaves. There's also a vocoder module, which is more your classic robotic vocals from another world. CompuVox, which is more, I guess, Sennheiser-y. And, of course, the TalkBox, which, as I like to say, is without the dribbling, if you've ever used one in real life. You can download a copy of iZotope's Vocal Synth free of charge and check it out without any limitations. I think it's 10 days. iZotope.com/vocal synth. Once again, we thank iZotope for their continued sponsor of the show. And in fact, we have a competition this week again, where you can win a copy of Vocal Synth. I will run this this week. I think this is I've got this awful feeling I might have used this tag already, but I can sort it out by date. I want to see the hashtag #IamRobot and the hashtag Vocal Synth to @Sonicstate and @iZotope Inc. That's if you're on Twitter, which is the way to enter this competition. Tweet the hashtag #IamRobot and hashtag Vocal Synth to @Sonicstate and @iZotope Inc. Once again, we appreciate their sponsorship, and hope that you enjoy the product. Right. Also, last week we had a similar competition, and we have a winner for that. And the winning tweet was, in fact, I'm going Voco Loco for Vocal Synth. Thanks, iZotope Inc. and Sonicstate. And this is from The Real Ken Chase, which is all one word. So, Mr. Real Ken Chase, if you're out there, please do get in touch, and we will put iZotope in touch with you, and you'll get your full bona fide copy of Vocal Synth. Once again, we thank them for their sponsorship of the show. Right, this was the next topic. Now, what's this? This is video 3, which is another video from iZotope, but this is new mixing technology, which is called Neutron. It's a suite of plugins that really kind of automatic. It seems to me it's a compression, EQ, multiband compression, and EQ. But it's got some really interesting analysis tools that basically says, yeah, I think this is what you should be doing on this track. And there's something called a masking meter, which basically you run across the tracks, and it tells you what you should set your other channels at, because there are overlapping frequencies, so you can get things more in focus, which, as far as I can tell, is a first. Now, I won't play all of this, because there's also another video which they posted, which is of the track assistant. The track assistant essentially does that. It analyzes the track you're on, it looks at it, and has a guess at what it thinks you should do. And what's really clever about it is it kind of goes, yeah, this needs multiband compression, and I think the crossovers should be here and here. This needs maybe 2 sets of compression, maybe a soft and a hard. It also deals with the EQ, and it throws in EQ, and also decides whether some of those bands want to be dynamic, because it's analyzing it. And this is the new stuff. And this is something that is actually really fascinating. I mean, I don't know how oops, I nearly got you drinking there, Rich. I don't know how you feel about that, Rich, in terms of, because it's essentially, it's not the Microsoft paperclip, thank goodness, but it's an interesting concept in that it will assist you. Mm-hmm. Indeed.
It's some delicious iced coffee right there.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yes, very interested in this product, and both the track assistant and the masking meter are its 2 most obvious sort of support tools that allow you to apply its processes in some very interesting ways and apply their analysis tools, which they've become legendary for in the last, decade or so, to these new ways of approaching mixing. Now, the guy on this shoulder, I'm not sure who's got the halo here or the pitchfork, but the guy on this shoulder thinks you should be able to hear that anyway. But the guy on this shoulder understands why having their view of it and letting them analyze it and show you what they find can't possibly be a bad thing, assuming that it's reliable. And I haven't used it, but I assume that it is reliable because their stuff is very good. So, will I find a day where that masking meter is showing me something that's going to enable me to achieve low frequency clarity that I've only dreamed of in the past? Could be. I don't rule it out by any stretch of the imagination. Will their track assistant analysis provide me with starting points that make me happy on a consistent enough basis to make me want to use it a lot? Could be. I hope so. The presets that come in their vast body of previous work, generally speaking, don't rock my world, even when their plugins do. So there's a side of me that's skeptical about their ability to determine through analysis whether what they think should happen is what I think should happen. But I'm absolutely not averse to asking. And I'm the same way on a session with assistants. I ask a lot. They're usually surprised how much I want to know what they think or what they would do.
Yeah.
Because it stimulates the conversation. It makes me think. It makes them feel involved and included, which is a beautiful side benefit to it. But it stimulates the environment. They meet a lot more people than I do in an average month. So I'm interested to know what they're thinking.
Yeah,
and it's the same with this plugin. That's why they call it Track Assistant, and it's cool. I'd like to see what iZotope thinks I might do with this and hear what the result is and compare it to what I envisioned for that thing to do.
Yeah, I wonder if it's got, because for this sort of thing, it almost feels like there should be a kind of growing body of knowledge, so if I plug it in, put it into my DAW and it suggests X and I go, actually, I prefer Y, does it send it back to the mothership and go, actually, in this case scenario, maybe you should suggest, we should tinker with it. The algorithm is self-learning, perhaps. Maybe. I'm guessing here, but it sounds like there's kind of potential there for some AI stuff and machine learning going on, because if it's just taking fingerprints and parameter locks and what have you, then it would make sense for that to happen.
So you're already basically modulating the library against which it's comparing all of these things and making its decisions.
Yeah. Well, it could. It would make sense. It could only get better. There's no way.
No, understood. I'd be impressed if it could just consistently enough release a good result with probably the fixed library of behaviors that it's expecting. Or I'm with you on that. It should learn how we work.
Yeah. I got an email from Chicky Reeves, Charles. He said he couldn't make it this week, but he was saying he bought this when it came out, and he said it's really rocked it. It's really changed the way he does a lot of things, because it's just it can create some really because it's got all this internal busing as well, which can work kind of across tracks. So you can end up with a situation whereby the kick drum track can send ducking signals and frequency dependent signals to the bass track, and then EQ that dynamically based on its input. So there's something clever inter plug-in instantiation communications. God, that's a mouthful.
Yeah,
but that's the stuff that's really interesting with with something called the masking meter, or is it masking meter, where it shows where these blurred lines. You can say, well, maybe you should look at the overlap between the guitar track and the bass track, and maybe create a bit of space in there. And those are the sort of things that probably easy to see visually and not always easy to hear and go, I know exactly what's going on there. I know how to fix that. So, I suppose that whole concept of the track assistant and that metering does sound really useful. I don't know. Do you use anything like that? John Van Eaton in the chat room said, why don't you just use a spectral analyzer across the mix and look at it that way? But it doesn't give you quite the same information, right?
Well, it's doing that substantially, but what it's doing is it's housing it within a plug-in format, not unlike the way FabFilter has done the same thing with their EQ, and enables you to, and in addition to all of that, as you point out, enables you to apply processes across two different tracks that can be at their most extreme example, the absolute inverse of each other. So where one is ducking something, one is boosting something, and you can actually create inverse behaviors based on a varying series of input parameters. But essentially, that's what they're doing. They are doing analysis. I understand on some level analysis is analysis, but they're applying. Especially as it relates to polyphonic analysis, as reflected in their RX products, they're applying some really interesting intelligence to trying to generate results out of their analysis. And I'm sure it reflects the tastes of the people who were there, for whom I have respect and have peripheral knowledge of. And Jonathan Weiner and the various other people who are over there at iZotope are very, very competent and well-trained and able people. And so they're getting good advice. And they execute generally really good, effective products. I might quibble their GUIs on occasion as being a little tweaky, but they're not hard to operate at all.
Well, that's cool. I mean, I think the thing is also, what's interesting about this is it's almost, I mean, in the way that mixing has developed from kind of moving faders to automating parameters of plugins, this is kind of almost like a sort of macro automation system, isn't it? But it's based on analysis. So you can macro tweak that EQ, you can macro tweak the crossover point, you can have all of these things kind of happening in real time, so you get much more dynamic, because that's since the advance of dynamic EQ, which is something that's really kind of changed a lot of people's lives. It's not something that I've used myself, but I mean, a lot of the people that we speak to say it's absolutely it's a game changer, because it means that you can clean up stuff and keep it clean depending on what the notes are played and all that stuff. I mean, that's the thing that's kind of interesting, and that's very complex, I suppose, frequency-based stuff.
So I would bet that some will assert that this is a very, very fancy and complicated way of sucking the life out of all of everybody's mixes to reduce the amount of individuality that is possible between you and I. Should you and I approach the same multi-track mix with this set of tools and apply their track assistant to these tracks,
would we end up with the same result? Yeah.
Well, sort of, or to what extent we would get close. I don't tend to think of it that way. Like I said, I'm interested to see what it would suggest, and I don't know how much I would use what they were pointing to, or how valuable I would find it. I suspect I would find it valuable, and I would find a way to deal with it, whether I liked their way or not. So I think, again, information's power, and it's cool that they're applying their analysis tools this way. And it looks like, to me, the next generation of what they had built up through Ozone to, I don't know, version 7 or 8 or whatever they're up to now, and they're fantastic, the Ozone plugins, and no quibble there, and no quibble with the RX, and no quibble with Alloy, and no quibble with the vocal stuff, and I have no quibble with them. It's if I do, like I said, it has to do with little interface issues, but this even looks like a cleaner interface to me than what had been presented in the past.
Well, you can buy it now. There's Neutron, which is the basic model, which comes with track assistant, mastering meter, and true peak limiter, and 500 presets for $199, or you can get the advanced, as is so often the case with theirs. They do an advanced version, and you get additional equalizer and masking mixer, individual compressor, surround sound up to 7.1, or get as a part of a bundle. But your cheapest option is a couple of $100, which, considering what sort of change it could make, it might be worth checking out. And I'd imagine at some point in the future we might be able to talk them into offering it up as a prize on the podcast after we get done with vocal synth. That would be kind of pretty awesome. But yeah, I just wanted to cover it because it does seem like actually quite a big deal in terms of new mixing technology, certainly in the box anyway. Okay, right, let's try this guy. Here's a video that looks really expensive and does nothing. Starts
really quietly.
This is, of course, Spitfire Audio, Albion V, Tundra. 100-piece orchestra.
In your back pocket.
In your back pocket, percussion. There's a whole bunch of different stuff going on here. But what's really interesting about this is they got 100-piece and they got everybody to play as quietly as possible and then down to sort of nothing. So all of these tones are recorded at very quiet play. That's the sales pitch anyway. But and I think there's some beautiful sounds in there. And they got drone shots and helicopter shots. But Spitfire Audio, for those who don't know, they've kind of started out as a couple of composers who decided to make their own stuff and do some other bespoke things. And this is kind of, it's become quite a big company. You know, they've really, you know, last year we saw them with a massive booth at NAMM and Music Messe. And so it's obviously going very well for them. And so they're putting these heavy production values into their sample library. I know Ty, who couldn't make it today, he said he really loves their stuff, you know. So, and this is just a new thing. I don't know how you feel about it. I mean, it's because it's, think about orchestra samples. I mean, you get good ones and you get good ones, but the difference is, I suppose, is how they approach it. And this looks like quite a unique approach, shall we say, Rich? It
does. It's another gorgeous example of deep contact programming, from what I can see. It's, after listening to a lot of their musical examples and watching a bunch of their videos, I have come to the conclusion that this thing is like soundtrack in a box. Because all of the sonic examples they give sound like soundtracks to a movie you've never seen. And they're all kind of inspired by the way soundtrack work has been going, and it probably makes getting those kinds of textures into your work very easy and quick. And I do love using Contact. So, but it was interesting because across 6 different demos and stepping through them 3, 4, 5 minutes each, I found a pretty solid consistency of overall texture that tended to vary across 4 or 5 different areas. But generally speaking, I wouldn't say everybody's stuff sounded the same, because it didn't, but it certainly sounded similar. And it all seemed to come out of a particular ethos that's no doubt very, very well represented in this product. I found myself quite interested in this product because I'm not sure there's anything else that really covers what it does in the way that it does. But it's kind of, I'm not sure if it's real I don't know if I see it as a record-making software.
I mean, to be fair, the 2 guys behind it, Paul Thompson and Christian Henson. Christian Henson is the guy in the video, and he's on a lot of the Spitfire videos. I mean, he's obviously a super smart composer, but he works to picture. Yeah. I mean, most of their stuff is designed to work to picture, though I think a lot of the sounds can easily be incorporated into electronic productions and stuff. I mean, I don't think there's many people doing that, but maybe that's something that we'll start to see, because these are very unique sounds. This kind of whole muted orchestra has a very specific, and there's thing about muted instruments generally, they can start to sound completely different. I remember I worked on the edits for Apollo London saxophone group. I can't remember what it was called exactly, but it was a load of Michael Nyman arrangements just done with saxophones. And they were doing things where they were all playing super quiet, and it just sounded like French horns, and then it sounded like, I mean, it was amazing, all these amazing dynamic differences between ensembles of musicians playing at different dynamic ranges, and I guess that's what they're looking for here. I mean, the video that we started to play was all about the sort of mood and the vibe of Arvo Pärt, and this kind of somber, solemn, soft, languid kind of soundscape. And I'm sure there's more to it. I mean, I haven't had the chance to check all of these out. It's huge, but that's their sort of world that they're operating in, right?
Yes, and a lot of his demos, he's all over the mod wheel, and everything starts out really, really quietly, and you're like struggling to hear things, which on the one level gives you a feeling of how they applied their recorded at the edge of silence idea and apply it to this thing. But as soon as you hear everybody else's demos, it starts out, bah! It's got like big loud beginnings on it and stuff, and very grandiose kind of, strings with harps and swirling textures behind it. And it's interesting. I think you'd really have to play with it to know exactly how to apply it to your stuff, but it sure does sound good.
Yeah.
I mean, it really, I was impressed with the ethic and the sound and the overall presentation. Again, I was a little surprised at how similar those 6 demo pieces that they present on the website sound to each other. in a way.
I've got a few.
They all sound good. And all the guys who did them are obviously very accomplished musicians. So it's not a quibble like that.
Yeah, there's...
yeah, you get that texture.
You get that texture. Oh, this sounds like they're playing louder than they were supposed to. What's going on here? Oh, this is the stuff, isn't it? This kind of really... This is by Harnek Mudar. I'm guessing I pronounce it. That's how I pronounce it.
It was a good try in any case.
I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, in the same way, I mean, I've just been looking at the DeepMind, obviously, here. And a lot of these kind of polysynths as well are expanding into this world of really sort of ambient, atmospheric, muted kind of sounds. It seems to be, I mean, maybe it's an age thing. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if the kids are necessarily into this, but certainly sort of the people who are commissioning programs and maybe looking for kind of vibes and atmospheres to some of the stuff they're doing. This is the kind of world they inhabit. Anyway, it's on sale at the moment. You can get it for... Let me have a look. It's available as part of the Albion bundle. Gosh, there's so much information on this page. I think there's actually some pricing information down here somewhere.
They've got synths in it too.
Yeah,
they've got a couple of different kind of synth engines going on. One of which allows you to apply randomness in varying amounts to various things, and it's pretty deep.
That's the that's the contact scripting, I guess, that you could do with that engine, right?
I guess.
Yeah.
I'm out of my league on that question.
I think if I've got it right here, I think the intro price is £299 UK pounds. It's $329 standard, which, you know, people do say, oh, that's a huge amount of money. But actually, you know, when you consider the amount of work and the cost of producing just the promo video, you know, it must be.
And there's nothing that does exactly this. I mean, it really does make available a set of textures that you'd have to work all day to get.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm kind of cool with that part of it. The strings in a lot of the demos tended to be a bit thin, for example, and not warm.
Right.
Even though they claim to have like gobs and gobs of them, it kind of got you know, edgy in that mid-60s French detective movie kind of way.
That's all right. Hey, look, we've just arrived.
It's Ty.
That's not Marc Tinley. That's Ty. Marc Tinley was supposed to be here, and Ty said he might be, but he's breathing hard. He's obviously just run up the garden path.
Do you know why I've had to run up the garden path? To go and unplug all the TVs.
Ah, so we can get some internet.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, I know. Hang on a second. It's going to be a bit ad hoc today, if that's okay.
That's all right. That's kind of how I'm feeling, to be honest. So it's perfectly all right.
It's going to
sugar.
Here's sugar. There we go.
There, look, he's just got... Ty, we were just talking about the Spitfire audio stuff. Have you downloaded Tundra? Have you kind of checked it out? Or are you in the process? I guess with an internet that crappy, it's probably still downloading, right?
I'm really fortunate because, you know, I'm not going to hide the fact that I know the Spitfire guys. And so I've got Tundra. And I can't explain. It's essentially a dream. I know for Christian, it was, this was always the library that he wanted to make. And for what I do and for what a lot of, you know, kind of media composers do, when I say this is a dream library, it really is genuinely, this is what we've wanted for decades.
Why?
And they're the first people to do it. And it's hard for people that don't understand orchestral writing. It's hard to kind of explain that we're so used to string patches and you know, woodwind patches and brass patches, but with a real orchestra with real players, the amount of expression and different articulations that they can get out, they never get sampled. So many of those kind of textures, they never get sampled, and so they're the first company that have just gone, do you know what? No, we're going to do it our way. We're going to do our thing. And it's beautiful.
Ah.
It's absolutely beautiful. It's a beautiful library. And but it's not just limited to soundtrack stuff. It's a texture that you won't really have heard before. It's almost granular. It has a kind of sense of granular synthesis about it as well. But it's completely natural. It's phenomenal. really beautiful library.
Ah, right, okay. Well,
I don't know what you've said about it, but if you had to turn around to me and say, sum it up in 2 minutes, that's what I'd say.
Right, okay. Have you used? I mean, where have you used it? I mean, the sense I get from the demos is, the articulations are all sort of quite slow and legato, but I'm guessing that's not the case at all. I mean, there's an awful lot of stuff in here, right?
There is an awful lot of stuff in there, and also in terms of the, I don't know whether have you talked about the Evo system?
No.
The movement.
Yeah, a little.
So they do what are called the grid system, the Evo grid systems, where there's a lot of movement going on, and essentially, so you can assign different regions, different sets of rhythmical. They're not even rhythms; they're developments, and they're like kind of mini orchestrations for each note, and you can basically assign these with key assignment patches across the keyboard. And so, just by literally loading in patches and playing a chord, you don't just get the same movement per patch. So, say, for example, E will be a certain kind of movement and a certain kind of development. The G will, again, be a different sample with a different slight orchestration. So you play one chord and you just get this evolving, moving texture, which is... genuinely, I mean, I can't kind of put into words how exciting it is from my point of view, and I know from Christian's point of view, because I spoke to Christian about it, who is him and Paul are in charge at Spitfire, and he said from his point of view, I found out about this weeks ago. From his point of view, this was the library he always wanted to make,
right? And
from my point of view, it was the library I always wanted to have. So. Okay. It's very exciting for me.
Well, that sounds like a good summary. We have spent a bit of time on this, but I'm glad you came in to join us with that.
I'm sorry I'm late.
No, that's absolutely fine. It's not a problem. You've come in at just the perfect time. In fact, going from the kind of sublime to the not so sublime, there was another topic that I covered. We thought about it a bit last week, which was some writing by a chap called Lawrence English, who's basically done a study on how sound has been used in kind of conflict and warfare, and how that certain sounds can create these kind of really intense emotion, which I'm guessing is sort of the antithesis of what, or the opposite of what you might want to do with a soundtrack, but it's still going to create emotions. And there's a really interesting piece on ABC radio in the States. In Australia, what am I talking about? An interview with him where he just goes through various different sounds heard, and there's the Aztec death whistle. Now, this is, I don't know if you ever heard this, but the Aztec death whistle, basically hits a chronology of sounds and things that are used that have really powerful effects on people, and it's to do with the frequencies that they operate at. Like alarms always happen in the sort of 1 to 2K region, which always grabs people's attention. And see if I can get the death whistle going, because it sounds absolutely horrible.
I mean, yeah.
I'll try and turn it down, because I have to say,
now I want to show you this. I want to share with you this very unique instrument we call the death whistle. The death whistle the Aztec use for special ceremonies, for Day of the Dead celebration, and also they use when they have a war.
Can you imagine 1,000 of these blowing? Wait till you hear it.
They play over 100 instruments, 100 death whistles.
Oh, 100 even.
Marching and make a lot of noise.
Yeah.
To cause a big psychological effects to the enemy. So this is very intimidating instruments, and this is very unique. So this is the death whistle.
I'm going to hold the fade. That's just so horrible. It sounds like one of those horror film scream. Can you imagine 100 of those coming towards you? I mean, I'd run a mile. I don't think. But there was just an interesting concept in the whole notion of how sounds could be used. And one thing that was very interesting also is they were playing, examples of tracks that they were using in psychological, when they're in interrogation situations. One of which was the Barney. I'm trying to remember if I've got the. Let's have a look. Yeah. I Love You, Barney and Friends, and some death metal, and they would alternate death metal with Barney. And I read somewhere that the composer of the Barney tune was really upset that his stuff was actually being used to kind of torture people effectively and get them to give up information. But it just struck me as a really interesting concept altogether. And there was I don't know if Ty, I mean, you do a lot of soundtrack work. I'm guessing probably more than Rich, you might have been asked to create a sound that was some way going towards making people feel really, really uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. I've had to do those kind of textures quite a lot. Yeah. I did a whole series a few years ago, which was all kind of true kind of horror stories, and there was lots. It was very textural, and there was lots of that going on. And to create those kind of sounds is just lots of dissonance, lots of volume, lots of clashes. Lots of very tight frequencies together, lots of prepared piano, lots of string harmonics. Yeah, I mean, they're fun to do, but my God, they sound awful, but that's what they want.
I think
this whole subject is really interesting because there's two main components that go on with this. Well, there's three. In terms of the Barney the Bear thing, it's the repetition, basically. It's the kind of... That's how that one's used. It's literally the same thing again and again and again, which can essentially, you can imagine, just drive you round the bend. Then you get onto frequency.
Here it is.
There we go.
I love you. You
Must we?
love me. We're a happy.
I can imagine for maybe 12 to 16 hours, that would be pretty distressing. I think we talked about this. I think we talked about this before, about the problem of working on something disturbing, like maybe a horror film, a soundtrack, or something that you're trying, having to, go back to the mix when somebody says, "Yeah, it's not quite." And you just have to keep listening and keep listening. It must be very difficult to work on this stuff because obviously it's having a similar effect on you as it's supposed to have on the audience, right?
It is. It is, and I think, but there's that element. There's repetition element. I have to say that I'm no great fan of death metal, and I listened to the example that you put up, and I have to say that I would have struggled to listen to more than five minutes of that because, I'm not a death metal fan. I'm struggling to recognise it as music, to be fair. But the whole using music as a kind of a weapon kind of thing is really interesting because we all know you can take anything, any tune, and if you increase it in terms of decibel level, that becomes painful. Everyone knows that. Everyone's had the experience where they've been to a gig and there's been that one note that's been just that bit too loud and so piercing your hearing starts to hurt. So you can understand why that's a kind of weapon. The other thing is obviously what you're saying about frequencies, because it's been well known now that, especially in the First and Second World War, they were developing instruments that were all based on frequencies because certain frequencies can do certain things, whether it be really ultra in the high range, so above our hearing, which can have psychological effects and it can affect our moods, right down to the really low stuff that we essentially feel. And when you go down to those really low notes, they can have a real effect on your body. And a century ago, or a long, long time ago, they were developing the frequency that essentially could make you go to the toilet involuntary, whether you wanted to or not, because they basically they found out what frequency coincided with the resonance of your bowels or something like that. And it basically made you... And they've already developed instruments that can make you vomit that exist to this day. There is a weapon that was developed that our body, our body cavity will, like a glass or like anything else, has a resonance. And so once they essentially can find the resonance of your body cavity, you can go from, this is all fact, this isn't made up. They can either go from making you feel uncomfortable to making you vomit to essentially making your organs explode. And this is all fact. This isn't made up. This is all out there. So sound is very, can be very, very dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, Rich, have you ever been in a situation in the studio where there's something about, a fundamental in a track and there's maybe a big sub driver in, big studio monitors, and it's done something that's made everybody go, oh, no, I've not got to get rid of that. What is it?
Well, there was an engineer who shall remain nameless, for the purposes of this story at least, who used to like to boost the lows and the highs on certain instruments, such that I used to joke that we would be running from the control room to the bathroom covering our ears, because it was exciting both ends of the biology. But the truth is, no. I mean, I have been in incredibly loud control rooms, and I bring earplugs for these occasions, even when I'm the engineer, because I just can't stand to be in that for 15 minutes and then go back to work like my ears are working normally. It won't work that way. So I do things to protect my hearing when I'm in incredibly loud environments, and have done since I was a kid. But everything Ty said made sense. Everything that's in this story makes sense. I get it. It was an interesting thing about the sounds they would add. I think some of it, the parts that aren't biological, specifically, the parts that make, your organs burst, is psychological in terms of what you're conditioned to hearing in what percentage at what sound pressure level. High frequencies in particular that are amplified to really, really high sound pressure levels are going to cause a lot of pain and discomfort for people. It's just the way we're built. I suspect other animals hear it differently.
Yeah, well, that's true.
I went to see Jean-Michel Jarre. Was it last week? Or it was last week, I think. And I have to say, the sound levels there, where we were sat, it was so loud. It was so loud. And
Wow.
I'm used to working in very loud studio conditions. I monitor generally at quite quiet levels, but then I have sudden bursts of very loud levels. And so I'm used to loud music, never an issue. And I've got something called Flare, little ear protector things that I take just in case. And my God, yeah, the Jean-Michel, fantastic sound. The sound system was incredible, but there was some frequencies in there that were really starting to be really painful for me.
Well, that's interesting. I'm surprised they got away with it, because there's so much control over sound system. I mean, maybe there was just a node where you were, where it was just
Absolutely.
moving around in it, right?
It could well have been exactly that, because there was no distortion. It was totally clean, and it was just around the kind of 4Ks. There was just a few bits where the 4Ks were just going absolutely mental, and really painful.
Surely the room would be lighting up at those sound pressure levels at those kinds of frequencies, assuming it was built out of what most rooms are built out of.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. The worst one for me was definitely One Direction in Birmingham, which
so
is
many levels.
10,000 screaming girls. I happened to have a pair of earphones with me, and I had to put them in because I've said this before. I felt bones vibrating in my head, and I just thought, this is not necessarily so good for one. And that was really, and I've never heard it. It was a bit like the death whistle. But times 10,000 rather than just times 100, and it was astonishing. I mean, they weren't screaming, with anguish. So there was joy behind it, which obviously made it less distressing. But it was still very, very powerful. But yeah, it's interesting. In fact, when I posted this on our Facebook channel, there was somebody posted the Kate Bush video, which was a story about this. In fact, a Kate Bush experiment for. They said they told us what they wanted was a sound that could kill someone from a distance to record it, and then, it's a great song, actually, and I heard it, and they use dissonance in there, but they don't go too bad. In fact, that video was banned, and the tune was banned on Top of the Pops, because it was thought to be too distressing, because Kate Bush appears as a beautiful sort of angel and then turns into a banshee quite graphically, and it's a bit upsetting, perhaps, if you were under 12, perhaps. So maybe that's why they did it. But anyway, I seem to be being rung, which is not so good. I don't know where my phone is, but I'll have to leave it.
On the subject of concerts that are so loud you had to leave the room, I saw Ziggy Marley once, and like Ty's recent experience with Mr. Jarre, it was insanely loud and very clear. But it was so loud that I had to leave the room. And there was no part of the building I could be still in and not feel my organs vibrating with the low end of this concert in that space.
But the thing is,
I think the most...
you kind of get to the stage where low end these days, you kind of come to expect the low end to be down there, and you can feel your innards rumbling away. You kind of expect that, but yeah, I kind of, those days of it being so harsh that it's, because normally, as we know, the distortion starts to kick in, and it changes the quality of sound. But this was it was so pure and so clean that it just went straight through you. But
it's interesting. I mean, I think because I used to do a lot of live sound, and I always found the transition from a pair of stacks at either side of the room, I've said this before, and I probably will, I've repeated myself, to the flown arrays where it was much more efficient. I found that really difficult because I was used to the adrenaline that a kind of more pointy sound system provided, and I like to think I knew how to work it, so I'd never push it too far, but it generated enough excitement and enough adrenaline for the audience to kind of get hyped up and enjoy it. And then I was always very resistant to people kind of pushing it too far because then it does become like difficult, and I wouldn't want my ears to ring, of course, because that was my job. But I miss, to some degree, that slight amount of imperfection and distortion that you get with the older rigs, even though obviously they'd cost a fortune to lug around because they're so inefficient. But so there's a trade-off. I went to see Massive Attack on the Clifton Downs a while back, and they were good, and they just turned it up really loud. And what was exciting about that was the depth of the sound, the bottom end, and those kind of occasional notes that just rang out. And that's a beautiful thing when you hear that. And that was, my daughter was there, she's only 12, and she'd never been to a gig like that, and she spent the whole time dancing because she'd never experienced so much range of sound, because she's just used to listening to stuff on YouTube and earbuds.
Can I just say one quick thing, only while you mention Massive Attack? Anyone that hasn't listened to the latest, I can't remember the latest Massive Attack single. Have you heard it, Nick?
Not sure.
I can't remember the one with. My head's going. I've been in a long meeting. Sorry. Their last single that came out is a double A side, I think, and it's this is so
Come
embarrassing.
Near Me.
No.
The Spoils.
The Spoils.
Dear Friend.
If you haven't heard that is one of the best tracks to have been released in a good couple of 2 or 3 years.
Oh, well, I'll check that out. I did really enjoy them. They were very, very good.
Completely slipped under the radar, and because there's no big, kind of announcement. Absolutely beautiful song, beautiful arrangement, and the electronics on it are to die for. So definitely check it out.
I will. Thank you for the tip. I don't know if you had anything else there to add, Rich, but it feels like it's probably about time to head off into the sunset. But yeah, please do. Just
briefly, because I understand the spirit of what you're saying about the old days and when you had this stuff stacked on either side of the stage and you were sort of using the brute force method as judiciously as possible to create the proper level of excitement. However, flown line array PAs in large spaces have completely revolutionized what can be done in them and the uniformity that you can present from the front to the back in an arena. So when you're standing, and I know you know this, when you're standing at the front of house mixing position listening to a well-performed mix in a large arena, it sounds like you're just in a big recording studio.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's incredible, because I don't know if you guys remember what hockey rinks sounded in the early 70s, but it wasn't pretty. And it's amazing now how much clarity can be projected to a large percentage of that space, which was not designed in any way to support this kind of behavior and effectively present something that's pleasant to listen to at some level. In our case, we're quite often limited. There's usually some kind of house police hanging out with a dB meter that's running what the front of house guys are allowed to do in any given spot. Now, there are some spots where that's probably not the case, and it may even be in some band's rider that you're not allowed to have that be the case, and they may book the venues accordingly. But most of where we play, there is a top end to what our front of house guy is allowed to present. And he works within that, and it sounds fine. And I'm sure it's quite loud enough. I mean, from what I can, what do I know? I'm on stage, but and anybody who's on stage and pretends to know has a serious problem.
Right. Well, thank you very much for that final piece of wisdom. I think it's probably time for us to knock it on the head. Just before we go, I want to say thank you very much to iZotope for sponsoring the show. If I just throw the competition up again, tweet the hashtag IamRobot and the hashtag VocalSynth to @Sonicstate and @iZotope Inc. That's the hashtag IamRobot and the hashtag VocalSynth to @Sonicstate and @iZotope Inc. That's on Twitter, of course, to win a copy of VocalSynth. Just remains to me to say thank you very much, Ty, thanks for coming in at the last minute there. I very much appreciate it. I hope we didn't throw your day.
Sorry, I'm late today. Sorry.
That's all right. It's been a pleasure as ever. It's not Marc Tinley as it says below, but he's an imposter. We weren't expecting him, and in fact,
I'll be Marc for the day. That's fine.
Well, that's fine. But thank you very much, Ty. Been a pleasure having you, of course, and look forward to it again. And also, Mr. Rich Hilton over there, who I'm sure is waiting to jump in a speeding limousine to go and make some chart-topping music with Nile Rodgers, right?
Waxing hotties day in and day out.
Yeah, I'm sure it must be a very, very rewarding process. Anyway, that's it for this week. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you next time. That was Sonic Talk number 468. Don't forget to subscribe if you like this and more. Don't forget, actually, I've got Analog Heats coming up soon. We've also got a preview. I've got my full DeepMind 12 review coming up very soon as well. See you later.